Why don't we get going? Um, Call this meeting to order. Vice Chair Judge, do you mind leading us in the pledge? Thank you, everyone. Madam Clerk, do you mind calling this morning's roll?
Chair Levere,
Here.
Vice Chair Judge, Commissioner Brogy, Commissioner Chavez, Commissioner Crosswhite,
Here.
Commissioner Enegren, Commissioner Engler,
Here.
Commissioner Francino, Commissioner Gorel, Commissioner Johnson,
Here.
Commissioner Long,
Here.
Commissioner Lopez, Commissioner McDonald,
Here.
Commissioner McQueen Lejeune,
Here.
Commissioner Parvin, Commissioner Tremblay, Commissioner Gloria Roberts.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. That takes us to public comments. Are there any public speakers this morning?
There are no public speakers this morning. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Commissioner Roberts, why don't we do our Caltrans report?
All right. Thank you very much, Chair, and good morning, Commissioners, Director Erickson. Just wanted to attach on our usual Caltrans report, make a note of a few safety projects because these are all partnership projects that we have put forth with feedback and coordination with the commissioners in their communities. And so just wanted to make note of project number 3 on the design. We do have the pedestrian hybrid beacon installation at Neptune's Net that we will anticipate beginning construction in early 2025. We're currently in the process of awarding the contract, and we anticipate getting that safety improvement done by the summer of 2025. Also at Mupu School on SR 150 in Santa Paula, there was a concern about a speed bump that we had put in during the time that we had closed the road and then got taken out, but that actually proved to be something that was helpful for children and parents as they were dropping off school. And so now, right now we have we've asked CHP for just additional enforcement and looking at, trying to get folks to slow down, but we also have a team doing safety assessments to see if we should put the speed bump back in or look at other alternatives such as striping and signage. So that is something that was, I think, unintended positive consequences, but then didn't realize that, it was something that probably should have stayed. So just this type of dialogue is very helpful in terms of us being proactive in safety improvements that we want to put in. And so lastly, also just design project number 10. This is a pavement rehab project that we are incorporating safety lighting at 3 intersections that was brought up and requested from a previous SOMIS MAC meeting. And so we anticipate completing design on that project in June of 2025. So just again, appreciate the continuous dialogue that we have with all of you and your communities as Caltrans continues to do its work. And I'm really looking forward to also introducing Tasha Higgins later on, our LA 28 Principal Transportation Engineer, who will be providing a report and update on our efforts in preparation for the LA 28 Olympics. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Roberts. Any questions on the Caltrans report?
I'd just like to say thank you. I appreciate, what you've all done for the Santa Clara Valley. I know that we have a fire going on there as well. So the anticipation of rains coming and all the work that'll be done in the future, also just appreciate the teamwork. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any commissioner reports this morning? Start with Commissioner Johnson and Commissioner Tremblay.
Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to report that I survived my first APTA conference. It was wonderful seeing Mr. Erickson there. Director McQueen-Lejeune was there as well. From our role in Gold Coast Transit. I will say I learned a lot of great things, and it was, I look forward to figuring out some ways. What I found most intriguing were hearing from people across the country about things they had done to ensure public and political support for transit, and bringing those strategies to things I can do once I leave my position as an elected official. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Tremblay.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just very briefly, hopefully this is the appropriate time for it. Had the chance to attend Mobility 21 a couple of weeks ago, together with a number of you, and I wanted to compliment the chair on his breakout session, his presentation during a breakout session in the morning. Both sessions were well attended and very informative. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I know there are several of us who are at Mobility 21, and I would encourage any of us who are able. It's always in Anaheim, so it's always close. It's one day, so it's not a huge schedule crunch for you. But yeah, there are several of us who are at Mobility 21, and it's really informative meeting with transportation officials. Commissioner Roberts, I know you were there with a lot of your team from Caltrans, and it's always a good conference, learning kind of what people are doing up and down the state with transportation in their regions. And then, as Commissioner Johnson said, it was my first APTA as well, and it was in Anaheim as well, so it was easy. I think next year it's on the East Coast somewhere, so a little more challenging to get there. But yeah, APTA is a great chance. I think, like Commissioner Johnson said, my biggest takeaway was all that's being done as we head into the new year, new administrations, what we're doing to make sure that the infrastructure funding that we've seen this year continues, because that could change, and it's really important that all of us continue to advocate for that money, because we're seeing how it's being put to use here locally with various projects, and just important that advocacy continues. Any other comments? I don't believe so. Okay, that takes us to our Executive Director's report.
Thank you, Chair LaVere. Just following up on my theme of partnerships that I've spoke about at last meeting and also spoke about at Mobility 21, I just want to acknowledge Director Roberts and her report, and the concerns at Mupu School, how quickly Caltrans responded. Also, my staff, Amanda Fagan, responded very quickly, and it's wonderful when someone sends concerns and they get addressed in a really quick manner, and you don't. And in some ways, you don't have to hear about them at this meeting. Still, you never know who's going to walk in the door. But it was just, I think, indicative of the, kind of rapid response we're developing in terms of responding to constituents' concerns. Mobility 21, we actually had 8 commissioners. Chair LaVere was there, Vice Chair Mike Judge, Commissioner Crosswhite, Commissioner Broggie, Commissioner Engler, Commissioner Tremblay, and Commissioner White, and Commissioner Chavez. So that was very well attended. The theme of the conference was Authors of Innovation, and focusing on transit innovations, transportation innovations. And it really made me think about just all the things we are doing here at VCTC. And I always want to acknowledge my small but mighty staff and the commissioners' guidance in helping us. Since Mobility 21, there was a conference that I know all the county supervisors participated in. It was put on by Danny Anderson of the county, and it was a disability mobility conference in downtown Ventura at the Crown Plaza Hotel, first of its kind. And I think Supervisor Parvin will remember when Danny first brought it up to me, I said, wow, that's an ambitious undertaking. And it really exceeded expectations. I think I learned a lot. Transportation and transit was one of the focus areas, but safety, hiring, it really covered so many areas. And as you can see from the Executive Director's report, I was on a panel with Gold Coast Transit with Cynthia Duque, and we had a great group from City of Moore Park talking about their Moore Park City Transit System, Brian Chong, and Michelle Woomer, and folks from the California Public Utilities Commission also who provide the funding for the program. And I want to just acknowledge Heather Miller again of our team for the work she did in putting that together. And as I was on a second panel with Amanda Fagan on Friday talking about our Transportation Emergency Preparedness Plan, whole other important discussion and section, how in emergencies or evacuations we can find the vulnerable populations and make sure they have a way out. But it's been a busy month since the last commission meeting, from the Banana Festival in Port Hueneme to Assemblymember Jackie Irwin's Safety Fair in Thousand Oaks. VCTC has had a presence, had a tent in many of these events, and I want to acknowledge Darren Peshka again and many other staff who've been participating in that. Finally, I don't want to forget, October 7th through the 11th is Rideshare Week. So take bus, train, bike, walk, well, rideshare too, but any of those activities are welcomed. I know many of your cities and the county are doing complimentary events. I have, you can't see them, but I'm wearing my bicycle socks today in honor of that day. But that will be another good day for us to promote transit along with our partners, Gold Coast and the rest of the transit operators. And with that, I'm open to any questions.
All right, thank you, Mr. Erickson. Any questions on the Executive Director's report? See none. I know we have some changes to the agenda this morning, so why don't you want to cover those?
Sure. We have a few minor changes to the agenda. Item 9G on the consent calendar is an agreement with a subrecipient interface, and it's not in the agenda item, but on the attachment on the contract that's online. There was just a minor change on the third page. There was a reference to invoice indirect overhead expenses of no more than 15%, which we had thought was the FTA guidance, but that actually should have been 10%. So we changed that to 10% in the final agreement, but I just wanted to make that note as we're doing the correct amount in the agreement itself. And then the second small change was just on 9J, the contract amendment with CPS HR Consulting on page 53 of your agenda. I erroneously put the wrong date for Director Peter DeHaan's retirement from VCTC as May 20th. It should have been May 30th. So thankfully we have several more months with Peter, but I wanted to make sure we had that right date in the record to reflect that. And of course, we will have time over the next several months to celebrate all the work Peter has done for VCTC before he formally retires. So thank you, Chair.
All right, thank you. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as revised? Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, that's unanimous. That takes us to our consent calendar this morning, items 9A through 9N. Any of my colleagues like to ask a question or pull an item? Seeing no other comments or questions. So this is the consent calendar in its entirety. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, that passes unanimously as well. Moving on to the discussion calendar, and we're starting with item 10, which is Commissioner Roberts and the Caltrans role in the 2028 Paralympic Games. Or is Director Erickson, are you going to start?
I'm just going to start by turning it over to Commissioner Roberts from Caltrans.
Thank you, Director, and so appreciate Director Erickson for inviting and giving us the opportunity for Tasha Higgins. She is our Principal Transportation Engineer and our point of contact for all things LA 28 for Caltrans. And so Tasha also had the honor of attending, being part of the observation group at the Paris Olympics in August. So in part of our presentation, she'll also provide some feedback on her observations and what we have in store as we prepare for what's coming up in 2028. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Gloria. Good morning, Commissioners, Director Erickson. Again, my name is Tasha Higgins, the Principal Engineer for the LA28 and District Liaison for Caltrans. And so I'm pleased to present to you how Caltrans is preparing for the Olympic and Paralympic Games of 2028. In less than 4 years, actually 1,378 days from today, the 34th Olympiad will descend on the Los Angeles and surrounding municipalities. Hundreds of miles of highway and local arterials will be impacted as the millions of athletes, media, spectators, volunteers, dignitaries, and visitors navigate our beautiful Southern California. This presentation will show you the overall transportation planning for the Games. But first, let me share a few things with you and tell you how we got here. So these are the numbers, and some of them may look a little daunting, but having been in Paris, I'm telling you, these are not exaggerated. We're expecting to generate about $10 to $15 million in ticket sales, and the preliminary traffic models are estimating that there will be an influx of 1.2 million spectators per day during the Games. We're expecting 65,000 volunteers and employees, 50,000 athletes and media officials. It is anticipated also, if you look here at the bottom, that LA28 will need to permit over 100,000 vehicles for this event. If you look at all these numbers together, the models are saying it's an equivalent of 7 Super Bowls per day for the entire length of the Games, a 2-week break, and then 2 Super Bowls per day for the Paralympic Games. That's huge. And having been in Paris, standing on the street when one venue got out and this 30,000 people started coming towards me, and then another group is coming, it's very overwhelming. So the permitting will require both for the use of the Games Route Network, which I'll explain to you what that is momentarily, and accessing the secure perimeter at every sporting venue. Los Angeles County Metro is the lead agency for traffic and transportation for the Games. And in 2020, Metro developed the Mobility Concept Plan, starting with a base list of projects. Then, in consultation with LA28, Metro's list of 28 went to 50. Finally, Metro, LA28, and the Games Mobility Executives, which includes SCAG, Caltrans, the City of Los Angeles, and Metro, they prioritized the list to 15 game-specific projects. So this mobility concept plan now contains a selected list of 15 priority mobility projects for the Games. This is a list of 8 of those 15, and 2 of the 15 Caltrans is leading. The others we are strongly involved in, and we collaborate with our local partners to actually execute and get the work done. I'll explain a little bit about some of these projects, but as you can see, one of them, called the Supplemental Bus System, has actually been renamed, and I'll share a little bit of what that is. We're involved in the Mobility Hubs project, as we have also some work for Mobility Hubs. I'll go into that a little bit, and the countywide bus lanes. We're also involved in the First Last Mile project down below. This is another 7 of the projects. You can see here there's going to be an integration project. This is one that Caltrans is leading with the City of Los Angeles. Metrolink has a project where they will be working to increase train service. There's also a major TDM project. I'll go into exactly what we're doing for that. And then the others are, Metro has a zero emission bus program, as well as access services, and they are working on their universal basic mobility, and integrated ticketing is another one as well. So I'll explain a few of those projects that Caltrans has touch points with in the coming slides. So what is the Games Enhanced Transit Service? It's called GETS, and the name was renamed from the Supplemental Bus System. The GETS project is a temporary bus service created to augment the existing public transit system to ensure the additional extraordinary demand of this mega event for transportation is met. The GETS will provide express bus service between the venues and mobility hubs and complement the existing transit network. Caltrans will be involved a little bit in this project as our real estate is being asked for, the need for storage of buses, depots for buses. If you've heard the term car-free games, you may have heard that term. It's actually transit first. We're trying to rebrand that term to be transit first. And you will not be able to access the venue. There will be a secure perimeter set up around the venue. So we're going to need to get people from those hub locations, and some of those will be on state facilities, to the venues. So that's how we're partnering with Metro. Metro will need to procure or borrow 2,700 buses, as well as LA 28 will need to do the same. So we're literally talking about double that of the number of buses that will be needed to get the athletes to and from their venues. Countywide mobility hubs. This project is also led by Metro. Metro has identified mobility hubs as a pillar of its transportation demand management strategy. The focus of mobility hubs is aligned with Caltrans and LA Metro's long-term goals and priorities. In addition to permanent walk, bike, transit, multimodal hubs, Metro will also be standing up temporary hubs. These hubs will be used as festival sites for people that cannot participate in the games or purchase tickets to the games. And also, they will be used temporary for, like I mentioned just a moment ago, for the GET system as bus storage or a transit facility. These locations will require some improvements, such as site prep, bus bays, resurfacing for high density, temporary buildings, IT, restrooms, ATMs, concessions, and of course, repairs and cleanup. If you look at that picture on the far right, that is a rendering, but it actually looked exactly like that in Paris. It was a festival site. They were all over Paris, and people who couldn't afford tickets, they were mainly seen as equity venues, and in some locations, they had the actual winners of the bronze, silver, and gold medals actually got to circulate with the public, and they had one called the Champion area, and it was really, those were really fun places. So they will be setting that up all over Southern California. Caltrans real estate and permits will be involved in this project, and the temporary hubs are being considered at universities, park and ride lots, and other locations. Countywide bus lanes. This one is also led by Metro. Metro has a plan to implement bus priority lanes on arterial routes throughout the region. Currently, there are 51 lane miles of dedicated bus lanes. Metro's goal is to add another 100 priority bus lanes by 2028. Some of these bus routes will be used as part of the Games Route Network to get the visitors to the Olympic sporting venue. This is where we come in, as Caltrans. Our plan is to have a consistent path from off the system, from the Olympic Village, which will be at UCLA, onto the highway and directly to the sporting venue. And our planning group, as well as my team, we are involved with the venue cities and the local partners to make sure that we can make a consistent look and feel. Very similar to what I just mentioned on the bus lanes, Metro and the City of Los Angeles is leading the First Last Mile projects. The First Last Mile improvements will be made at several locations to create a calming street and bicycle and pedestrian-friendly improvement at the first and last mile of the sporting venues. Once again, the Games brand will look at the streets and be consistent, and you will know where you are. Caltrans is working closely with the venue cities and our local partners on the development and funding for these improvements. The Transportation Demand Management Project. This one is led by our partners at SCAG. And there are actually 2 TDMs that will be developed. One is for countywide traffic and the other one is for freight. The TDM will help us make the Games Route Network successful and help us manage demand and keep the region moving. The TDM is a set of strategies aimed at increasing the efficiency of the transportation system, reducing vehicle miles traveled, and greenhouse gas emissions through alternative modes of travel. The TDM investments reduced congestion and shift trips from single occupancy vehicles to other modes. We've set a goal of reducing vehicle trips by 20%. So the plan for both the TDM and the communication will be done in 2025 and 26. And then by 2027, it will be a full public campaign. And some initiatives like transit discounts, work from home campaigns, and initiatives will be initiated. Now, I saved the last two for last because they're our babies. They're the ones that we're leading, and my team is leading. And so the first one is the Integrated Transportation Management Project. This one is led by Caltrans and the City of Los Angeles. The Integrated Transportation Management Project is actually not one, but it's multiple collective, collaborative projects between LA Metro, the City of Los Angeles, and Caltrans. The most significant work performed here is the integration of the city's traffic surveillance system with the Caltrans TMC. Also, our local partner at Metro manages the Regional Integrated Intelligent Transportation System. This platform, called RITS, RITS allows for multiple cities, including our venue cities of Carson, Long Beach, and Inglewood, to actually share camera and data feeds so that we can actually know what's going on and actually be able to make decisions and keep traffic flowing. Each agency will make improvements and upgrade and install new cameras, fix our fiber, pursue real-time traffic monitoring. This project will help create and develop the Incident Command Center, which will be the hub of any emergencies that will happen while the games are on. And our staffs are planning to co-locate within the offices so that there's no loss of communication. The rest of my time I'm going to spend talking about the biggest of the projects Caltrans is leading is the Games Route Network. You may have heard that there will be dedicated lanes, and so I'm going to explain to you how we got there and what we've done so far. So this is led by Caltrans. The GRN, it's called the Games Route Network, is the GRN. It's a network of freeways and local arterials that will allow the Games family vehicles to travel to and from the Olympic venues and official sites. The primary purpose of the GRN is to allow the Games family vehicles, which are thousands of specially marked cars, permitted vehicles, to get to their destination on time. The Games family vehicles will carry designated athletes, officials, dignitaries, politicians, and media to their required location. The secondary purpose of the GRN is for use of transit vehicles and buses used to take spectators and volunteers to the competitions. And of course, the lanes will obviously be used for emergency personnel and law enforcement. The GRN will include temporary signage, pavement markings to signify which lanes are for Games traffic only, and the general public will be prohibited from using those lanes during the games. How did we get here? A little history. I'm a history buff, so I tried to find out exactly when did this start and why. Well, in case you were wondering, the idea of the GRN was developed by the International Olympic Committee in the year 2000, after the athletes' officials missed their competitions at the Atlanta 1996 Games here in America. The IOC came up with the transport plan. It was called the Olympic Route Network, and it was actually codified into the contract of 2012 London Games. So even though they came up with the idea in 2000, it was until 2012 that actually contractually for a host city to want to host the games, you had to commit to providing dedicated lanes so the athletes would not miss their competitions. So this 2028 is the first time a GRN is implemented in America. So this is our map as of today. Right now, LA GRN is, LA, Orange County, and San Bernardino GRN is approximately 360 centerline miles, which is equivalent to 720 highway miles both ways, local and arterials. To determine which routes were used, the team completed a traffic analysis and evaluated current and anticipated travel demand. The red lines here indicate the primary route, and the green, you can kind of see some green over there, it's the alternate routes for emergency purposes. The highest volume of traffic is expected in this triangle area around UCLA, Long Beach, Carson, up to downtown. We know the Olympic Village will be at UCLA, and downtown will be the media center. The operation of the GRN in these areas will likely be on a 24/7 basis, but we are still working on our traffic models to be, waiting on our traffic models to be completed. The use of the timing of the GRN on the highways and the venues will be based on the modeling, which will include the game schedule, and it could be operated less than 24 hours in some areas if it does not make sense to do. You may also notice that there are some north-south routes that are not being used as part of the GRN, say the 710, the 605, or the 5. This is because we saw that we needed to keep the region moving with the freight moving as well as, and the freight TDM will ensure we are considering making sure our ports have less impact of goods movement during this time. Now I'd like to go a little deeper into the scope of the GRN. One of the keys to success of the GRN is that once the travelers exit the state highway system, LA 28 will I mentioned the branding so that as they go off the state highway system onto the local roads, you will know where to go. And we experienced that in Paris. There were buses that got lost. They didn't know where to go. It was so much traffic. There were, and the Paris actually implemented minimal signage and minimal pavement markings and minimal, they didn't really know where to go. So they used their Google, but Google wasn't updated. So they got lost. And while we were there, some of the skateboarders got off the bus and skated to the venue because they weren't going to get there in time. So that was their warm up. So on the freeways, Caltrans is considering four options. One, dedicating shoulders if appropriate. Two, dedicating toll and express lanes. Three, dedicating high occupancy vehicle and carpool lanes. And four, we have at least one location, actually we have two, that have general purpose lanes that will be dedicated for the GRN during that time. Once off the freeway, we're working with our local partners at the venue cities you saw on the map to make sure that they restrict parking on the streets and we can actually get the buses to the venues. All of this will be done in collaboration with our federal partners at the FHWA. We are working with Southern California office to develop a supplement to the MUTCD, which is a manual for uniform traffic control devices. And right now, we've just had the 11th edition released, and California has not yet updated it for the California version. So we're coming right in between those two updates to do an Olympic MUTCD supplement. And we're going to get that approved for not only Caltrans, but also the local cities for their signs that they're going to need. This is a picture of the various applications since 2012 of the GRN. You can see here London, Qatar, Glasgow, and Vancouver. We call it the Games Route Network as opposed to the Olympic Route Network because we are hosting both games and the GRN will be active for both. These are some pictures I brought back from Paris. So you can see, I mentioned there was just minimal application. They really just had a couple pavement markings. You can see they implemented dynamic signage that actually would turn into carpool lane based on demand after the games. And they can control that from the TMC. And the type of vehicles that we'll use, the GRN, go anywhere from a passenger car all the way up to a commercial bus and everything in between. So what have we done today? As of today, the Games Mobility executives have completed a preliminary traffic analysis, started a travel to demand model, and identified the draft routes, which you saw on the map, and completed a conceptual cost estimate. We have also initiated engagement and meet monthly with our federal highway partners and have received their conceptual support for implementing the GRN and for using the color blue. So there are two colors that are left in the MUTCD guide that are unassigned, and we have asked them if we could use the color blue, and they have given us so far the heads up, the thumbs up that we could do that. Waiting for approval until they get some actual plans to approve. But we began our preliminary design on the integrated project delivery team, and we are working with FHWA on maintaining our conformance with the federal regulation. To the right, you will see some of our draft signs that we've been putting together. And we've also drafted a non-standard specification that will be included in all our Caltrans contracts because during the games, we will institute a construction moratorium. There will be no construction on Caltrans facilities or within our right-of-way. Here is a general timeline of the operations of the GRN. This schedule shows transportation-related activities. By June, the Transportation Management Plan will begin. The construction moratorium will be in effect, and the integrated traffic management centers will be live and ground central for emergency operations. The athletes will begin arriving in late June, and the GRN will go into full operation. The GRN will be deactivated. Striping and signage will be removed by the end of the Paralympics. So it's approximately 60 to 80-day operation that we're talking about. I mentioned the construction moratorium. Just wanted to highlight that a little more because we are working with districts 7 and 8, 7, 8, and 12 on the moratorium. And we're trying to get this language in right now because as we are getting ready to list our projects and send them out to bid, we want to make sure that this language is already there so that we minimize our exposure. And thank you very much. This concludes my presentation. I'm welcome to answer any questions you may have.
Great. Thank you so much. That was you're gonna have a busy 4 years. Yeah. Any questions, Commissioner Francina?
Yes. Yes. You are so welcome. Uh-huh. The moratorium is where we issue a statement that no construction can take place. We don't want to delay. Yes, you got it. Yes, you're welcome. Thank you.
Commissioner Crossway?
A question. So during the 2 weeks in between the Olympics and the Paralympics, are there Olympic related activities that will use those lanes, or will those lanes just essentially not be used during those 2 weeks?
Well, during the 2 weeks, so there is a tear down and a build up as well. So they won't be necessarily used by the athletes trying to get to their games, but it would cause confusion in the public if we were just to open it up and then close it again in 2 weeks. So likely it will still remain closed. I anticipate some of those 100,000 vehicles are actually official vehicles that need to deliver products to the venues. There's a lot of new structures that need to be, temporary structures that need to be torn down and built up. So yeah.
I was just, I assumed that that was the case. I was just trying to think how you communicate to the public if they have frustration around, well, there's a whole lane there and I can't use it.
Yes.
So I was just trying to think.
You know, yeah, in
what
Paris.
the communication is to let them know, well, there might still be some things that we're doing with it.
Right. Actually, I have a sign here. In Paris, I don't have the actual one on the local street. On the local streets, it was a little easier because they had from and to dates that you could actually put from this date to this date, and then there was a gap, and from this date to this date. But on the freeway, I could see that being a little more difficult. But we're still evaluating how to do, how and which routes would be most favorable.
Thank you. I did have a question on the GRN scope slide. That's the slide. Yeah, there we go. Thanks. So shoulder use, dedicated express lanes, dedicated HOV, and purpose lanes, bus only. Those are intended to be complementary, not mutually exclusive, correct? And one area may be a dedicated HOV lane, another area may be a dedicated express lane.
That's correct. Correct.
Area, which one is that a function of transportation?
It's a function of our traffic analysis. We have to do, we're doing the modeling right now. So we use the SCAG model as our base. We're building onto the SCAG the actual design of the games route network, which was the map, which routes we want to use, which ones have an HOV, which ones don't have an actual lane. And then we build on top of that our TDM. So the TDM will take the cars away. And then we put on the game schedule. So of the 14 days, day 7 is the highest volume, at least historically. So all of those are built on top of that. And then we add in the cars that we believe we're going to need. So it's pretty, I'm not the expert on that. I have a modeling team that's doing it, but yeah, that's what we're actually going to do. You're welcome. Thank you.
Mr. Engler?
Thank you. Again, great presentation. Answers a lot of questions. We can see the future coming down the line. The light is a train in the tunnel, maybe, but the questions I really have is you mentioned in Paris seeing venues let out and thousands of people walking down the street. I've experienced some of that going down to SoFi and waiting for the public transportation to get away from SoFi for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
What planning has been going in for that surge transportation that's needed?
Very good. So I have been meeting with the City of Los Angeles on how we're actually going to manage this influx. And some of the things they're talking about is having one route for the inflow and then sending people out another route. Paris was a little, this particular area where I was, which is right where the Eiffel Tower was, there are two venues in the same secured area. So it was just everybody comes out and you're all right here and everybody's trying to get to transit. In this case, we're trying to manage the flow in. As you're flowing in, there's another influx of thousands of people flowing out. So they're just trying to keep them not crisscrossing each other and then get them to the transit station or get them to the bus station. I think that SoFi is a perfect example, as well as the Dodger Express, as well as any place where we're trying to get thousands of people onto the buses to get them out of an area. So we're still in the planning stages trying to do that, but that's the thinking that the City of Los Angeles is working on right now.
Thank you. I know that's going to be an issue, and that one-way traffic may be a partial solution to that.
Yeah.
So, the other thing is, I know you're looking at a lot of signage and other infrastructure going in on Caltrans properties.
Yes.
What's the funding source for that? Is there going to be a ticket share? How are you going to pay for that, as well as some of the other agencies that are looking at having to meet that surge traffic?
Yeah.
So Commissioner Engler, that's a great question, because that's always, everything boils down to the resources, right? And so on the state side, at least on the state highway system, we do have budget change proposal that we're requesting for the Department of Finance, but also LA Metro and all of the agencies associated are going after federal grants to, because this is an international event, right? And this is actually something that's not just for Southern California or for the state of California. This is the United States. And so this is where we have been successful in terms of Tasha and members of the LA Metro and all of our partners like MetroLink going to the federal government and asking for that support. And I think we were successful in terms of them understanding that there needs to be some contribution. And so that's going to be an ongoing dialogue, given the magnitude and the scope, especially as we work with the local cities to work on the signage and the wayfinding, because that's, to your point, is we're going to have people that are not familiar, right, with Southern California and having to find their way in and out of the venues at all hours. Because I think one of the things, Tasha, that can't recall if you touched on is it's not just the games, because local cities are going to have their festivals and their activities that are going to be happening at all hours. So those are the types of things. It's going to be basically like a 3-week party, right, of various locations. And so the wayfinding signs is going to be crucial. I think that's one of the takeaways that you brought back from Paris is wayfinding is going to be kind of the integrated from no matter where you are, you have this Olympic, identifier to let people know if you need to go to places A, B, and C, you should follow these signs and be able to get around.
Yes, and not speaking French and being in Paris for the very first time in my life, I knew where to go. There were a lot of pink signs everywhere. And I think a result of that, we are standing up a new committee called the Wayfinding Committee. One other thing with funding is you mentioned the federal government. We also are asking for the president's budget to give us some money as well.
Thank you for the presentation, and I'm going to speak from the rail side of the world. I sit on the LoSAN board, and I just reached out to my staff, and I asked them, I certainly hope we're talking to somebody about the upcoming Olympics and also the FIFA games in 2026, because those are both going to have an impact on all of our infrastructures. I know that my team is having discussions with Metrolink, Southern California Regional Rail, and I just want to make sure that I've expressed to my general manager that we really need to be sure talking to Caltrans. And he says, we are trying to get into more train sets and more equipment, but I'm going to reach out to them again and suggest you should be talking to District 7 also, and making sure we're in communication. So I believe we are. If we're not, please let me know, and I will make adjustments or recommend adjustments to that.
Yes, please.
Because I think the trains are going to be bringing a lot of folks in.
Yes.
And then they're going to be scrambling from Union Station to wherever to get to venues.
So thank you for that, Commissioner McDonald. Tasha and other members of the team are actually going to be meeting with OCTA on Monday. So knowing that they are the lead for the LoSAN Regional Rail, this is perfect timing. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Higgins, for the presentation. A lot of information. And I have a few questions, few comments. Don't know if you'll have the answers to the questions, but you mentioned in your presentation that LA Metro is going to have to borrow roughly around 2,500 buses. I came from working from LA Metro for 9 years, and I know there are different modes. We have the ZEB buses, and then we also have our CNG buses. So my only question, and you may or may not know this, is how are they going to be able to utilize the infrastructure that's already there? Because every agency has something different. They have LNG, they have CNG, they have electric buses, and all electric buses aren't built the exact same way. They don't have the same charging mechanisms. CNG stations are very limited in LA County to division sites, or there are some public hubs for CNG, and very limited locations have LNG. So how are these buses going to be powered, fueled, and ready to keep moving people around?
You're right. I don't know the answer to that one, but I do know they're working on that. I don't have the answer on how. So the plan for this, this project, getting the cooperation from whoever they're going to get those 2,700 buses from, and the mechanics, and I mean, even more, all the things they're going to need to keep the drivers.
Yep.
And if I could give you one other lessons learned from Paris, 4,000 drivers from all over France came to drive these buses, this bus need, the 500 new service lines that they set up. And that's one of the reasons they were getting lost, is they didn't have the proper training. So it's so, and then they got to house them and they got to feed them. It's a huge undertaking. Metro has estimated this project at about $1 billion. So I actually don't have the answer to the specifics on them, how they're going to operate.
I was anticipating not having an answer to it, but
Well, actually, Chair Levere, if I could just, on that, I think it's a really great question, and the coordination is significant. I will say we have been, whether the Mobility 21 board, the CEOs of all the Southern California agencies has been discussing this, as well as working with Metro and some of the early planning groups. I think one of the big challenges versus 1984 is you've got many different buses being fueled many different ways. Before the meeting, Tasha and I were speaking, and I came to realize that we came to both realize we were 14 in the 84 Olympics. So
right.
I commented how young she was to be here. But if you think about that 84 Olympics, and for those of you who've looked into that or remember that, I know Peter DeHaan remembers it because he was at LACTC at the time. they he was helping load buses then, but it was really they call it kind of a miracle, traffic miracle. They focused on TDM strategies, buses, all kinds of, and this was before cell phones really. So you think now with the technology we have, and I just wanted to make the one comment of thank you again, great presentation. For those of you who've seen The Italian Job, the movie, LADOT's Traffic Management Center in coupled with all the other traffic management centers in LA are going to be all coordinating, and that, that provides something that we didn't have in '84, but it is having seen that in operation. It's a pretty incredible system. So.
Yeah, we also didn't have the Amazon 24-hour delivery, so we're managing a lot right now, but we're hoping our TDM is very strong.
And I appreciate those comments, Director Erickson. I just think about my experience as an operator in LA. There were roughly 3 to 4 different types of buses, 3 different manufacturers, which means if I jumped into one bus, it wasn't the same as another bus.
Right.
So operators operating these buses, hopefully when we're borrowing them, that they're coming with the operators. That way they know how the bus works versus throwing somebody who doesn't know and then have to get familiar with it. Dedicated bus lanes, I think, is a great idea. From my experience, there are those peak hours in LA, whether it's in the valley, whether it's downtown. Traffic is horrible, plain and simple, and the dedicated bus lanes work. Our vice chair made a comment in regards to people are still going to use those bus lanes regardless. So my question to that is, are they going to be protected bus lanes or are they going to be open bus lanes? Because I did do the Dodger Express shuttle, and I can honestly tell you that there was cars jumping into that bus lane every single time. We had traffic officers out there, but they can't be everywhere at once. They tried the cones. We all know what happens to cones in cars. They just don't stand up very well. So are they going to be protected? Are they going to be open? How are these going to be patrolled to ensure that those that are permitted and actually authorized to be in those lanes are using those lanes?
Yeah. So you've hit on you're seeing now the onion as the amount of work that we have to do is enormous. Coordinating with our law enforcement is key because not only on the streets, but we have that on the freeways as well, and our channelizers don't stay up very long. We're still in the planning stages, so I can't tell you exactly how the arterial bus lanes will be protected, but we are working with our law enforcement very tightly to ensure that we can keep the people that should be in there. I could tell you again, a lesson learned from Paris. The bus lanes that they dedicated in Paris, they did not reroute their current line that was on the line. That actually created delays for the Games family. So we've learned from that. Everybody, the current line has to be rerouted. But as far as the protected, it's still in planning.
And that was going to be my next question because LA, there's tons of bus lines.
Yes.
East, west, north, south, and then circular service. So I'm assuming those are all going to be rerouted away from the dedicated routes.
Correct.
For the venues.
That is the assumption we're working on to plan the design of the bus only lanes for the games. Yes.
And then the next thing that I was going to question was in regards to contingency plans.
Okay.
In terms of, we often hear, and it's a bad topic, but we often hear of threats made against large events. Yes. And police presence end up having to go investigate, make sure that it's safe, because it's about safety and well-being of everybody that's participating in these things. Are you guys looking at these things like, okay, if this dedicated route that's supposed to be for buses or traveling from venues to venue so happens to get disrupted, what's our alternative route?
Absolutely.
Because I can honestly tell you from my experience years ago when President Trump had a meeting in downtown LA Metro created a detour route for all of our buses. The next day, that detour route was a complete mess and you had buses going everywhere. It was a complete, utter mess. So hopefully those contingency plans of alternative routes, hopefully undisclosed alternative routes, so that, in that event, bus operators are able to adjust right away. And then the last thing I'll just say is I like the idea of signage, tons of signage, so that there leaves no doubt of where you're going.
Right.
Because I can honestly tell you that the very first time that I started driving in LA, they told me to hop onto one freeway. And this is not a dig, but Caltrans closed that on-ramp, and I had no way to get out of downtown LA. I was stuck there. I was driving a 60-foot bus around trying to figure out how to get out of downtown LA to get to Compton. So tons of signage. I love the idea. And again, if we're going to have people come from outside of our area, outside of our country, they need to be able to feel comfortable traveling through our streets and have a good experience. That way, the next time, we can host again
right.
and go through all of this all over again.
That's right.
Thank you again.
Thank you. Sure. I totally
Yeah, thank you for that presentation. Exceptional. It inspired a lot of emotions, including but not limited to, I'm so grateful I no longer hang my hat right now in City Hall, Los Angeles, and I'm up here. We were part of the prospect of planting the seed that this was a great idea, and then retreated and allowed another administration to execute it. But this is the great question brought up on security. That was the one challenge in Paris, was an attack on the transportation,
Yes.
passenger transportation, and I know that folks are looking at that. The other thing that inspires me is I really would love to have a conversation with my fellow commissioners and the staff, and I know that you guys are way out on this already because we have the best planning staff ever. But is to really look into how we connect into this, our constituents get down there. How I'd like to understand better Metrolink's strategic plan, so we can get as many people on Metrolink. And then if we're trying to get our constituents not to drive down to LA, can we use our park and rides? Is there a public messaging campaign with a catchy phrase that allows us to get the word out for our constituents and start to build an expectation that we're planning for this? Because even if our constituents we get them smart enough not to get in their cars and find an alternate way to get to Los Angeles and enjoy the amazing things going on down there, our community is still a throughput for everybody else, and it's our 101 corridor is already locked up in various parts of the day. So how can we do our very best to try to get people out of their cars and other ways to get down there? I even started to think many years ago, Mr. Erickson, you remember we had a law firm in Oxnard, represented a group of people that were trying to get going transportation up and down the coast with high-speed ferry from Ventura, Oxnard down to LA. And it's almost like all hands on deck for any creative thinking to help people try to figure out ways to get to LA other than the 101 in a car.
Awesome.
The green.
And I'm on the LA 28 ad hoc committee for Metro, and together with Alan Walker from Ontario. And on September 16th, Alan and I and the chair of our board, Larry McCallan, Barry Kettle, and senior Metrolink staff met with senior staff from LA 28, our initial meeting with LA 28, chief operating officer for LA 28. It's a daunting task, and I know there's also the Games Mobility, the GME team that's meeting, and I think, Tasha, you're probably part of that as well. And you might want to explain the GME executives, but from a Metrolink standpoint, you'll know that we've talked about this before. Our basic position is, look, and I'll talk a little bit about this later, but we have our baseline level of service. And we're going to a new level of service beginning later this month. And so the bottom line is, look, we have this level of service. We expect demand will be substantially higher during this temporary durational time of the Olympics. And therefore, we have to serve our existing ridership and make sure, in terms of rerouting of the lines really hit home to me, in terms of serving the existing ridership. And we need financial assistance in order to meet that demand. Just for sake of example, Metrolink is anticipating that it's going to go borrow train sets from Caltrain in Northern California and from Chicago. And it will have to bring in crews to operate those, et cetera. Just the operating demands, to give you financial context, just the operating demand amount of money involved is in excess of $100 million for O&M. That is about, and the capital cost that Metrolink has preliminary estimated is in excess of $600 million. Now, part of that is met through the SCORE program and otherwise, but it's a huge financial commitment. So just contextually, I just wanted to assure Commissioner McDonald, Losan does need to be part of that. And the Metrolink planning and the staff planning for that has already started. So, and I really, the Paris, from a Paris standpoint, where those attacks were is on signal infrastructure on rail lines, which were ultimately repaired.
Yes.
But they had to be very nimble in order to get to it. One of the challenges for Metrolink is the system is so spread out. It's not centralized like Metro in that way in LA. It is so spread out among 5 counties that it's going to require some very robust planning in order to address that if the unfortunate event were to occur. So thanks for letting me give you some additional context.
And I can share with you the games mobility executives, who the players are for the first, I would say the micro group, the initial group is the City of Los Angeles, LA 28, Metrolink, SCAG, Caltrans, and Metro. We are in November, you can expect to hear see or receive a call from Metro to join the larger regional convening. And that will include all of the regional transit agencies that are going to come in, and we're going to start having those meetings. So they promised that November would be a meeting for the regional convening. So I will make sure you are aware of that meeting. Claire.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm curious, what are the plans around the airport?
Wow, that's interesting. So LAX has its own plans, but we are hoping to run a pilot of predictive monitoring right around the airport at the 405. The 405 is our main corridor. So you can see there, right not far from Inglewood, that is LAX, that little piece that's coming out. So it is along our main corridor. So that will be a dedicated lane on the HOV. Yes, it's one of the highest volumes of traffic. We know that. The 405 in at least 3 spots are very, very high volume. But yeah, that will be one of our locations. And we're looking to do some real-time traffic monitoring in that location as well.
Thank you.
Tasha, if I may also add that I know that LA Metro will be opening the LAX Metro Transit Center later this fall, towards the end of the year, where all of the buses will kind of like a bus depot for people to drop off. They call it a
ITF, the ITF, Integrated Transportation Facility.
No, it's actually for the connection for the future people mover that will open next in December of 2025. So that anybody that's going into LAX, you no longer have like the masses of different hotel shuttles that are making that U. And so the whole intent is for folks to be able to take transit to the LAX Metro Transit Center and then hop on the people mover to get into LAX. You can certainly still drive there in a private vehicle, but all of the hotel shuttles and various shuttles, you know, and if you have a rental car going into LAX, will be parking at that location and then picking up the people movers. So the plan is to have both of those systems up and running by 2028. So I think even in time for the Super Bowl.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I don't believe so. Thank you so much, Ms. Higgins. That was exceptional. Thank you. Okay, and then. Okay, item 11 is the 25 to 34 Ventura County Short Range Transit Plan update.
Thank you, Chair Levere. I'll just open this quickly before turning it over to our Transit Director, Clara Grasti, and our presenter, Jeremiah Rose. Great discussion last item. I want to just thank Director Roberts again and Tasha for that presentation. It's kind of a perfect VCTC day going from the highways and our planning for the LA 28 Olympics coming up to something near and dear to my heart as a former transit director, our discussion about our countywide short-range transit plan. But I did just want to note, Commissioner Gorell, we are in discussions with both LoSan and MetroLink, and we are going to be very engaged in the planning, and we'll be providing periodic updates to the commission on our progress there, because like you noted, and like your previous in your previous career, there's a huge coordination challenge and opportunity with the City of LA, all the other partners, the other transportation commissions, Caltrans, really everybody. So thank you for the great questions. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Claire.
Thank you. Martin mentioned Jeremiah will be doing this presentation. I think we're just very excited to be here. And at this point in the short range transit plan, it's a very ambitious, large project that covers all of the transit operators, besides Gold Coast, who's doing their own, and all of that will be incorporated into this larger plan. And it's a complex time in transit. So it's been a great project. So I'll pass it off to Jeremiah.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Claire. Okay. So we've been working on the short-range transit plan. There we go. Kicked off about a year ago last fall and really got into high gear at the beginning of this year in January with community engagement and a lot of data collection. We've been spending an inordinate amount of time here in the community, observing transit, talking to riders, working with staff, and so I'm really excited to talk to you today about the progress that we've made. And you can see that we're progressing towards recommendations at this point that we'll be going out to the public with shortly. We'll talk about that more in detail in a moment. And expect to wrap the short-range transit plan up in summer 2025. So that may sound like a long time away, but it will be here before we know it. And we've done a lot, but still have quite a ways to go. Our process for developing concepts to help improve public transportation in Ventura County involves, as I mentioned, lots of data collection and observations, talking with staff, talking with the community, and gathering data. And that's largely the bulk of what we've spent our time since last fall, is just doing observations and trying to really get our arms around all the different opportunities and needs in the county. And we'll talk about how we've broken that down in a moment. So we've conducted outreach and surveys with transit drivers, transit riders, paratransit riders, dial-a-ride customers throughout the county. And right now we're in the midst of steps 3 and 4 here on the slide, the consultant team evaluation, drafting concepts, and vetting concepts with staff. We're scoped to develop up to 4 concepts for each participating agency, and our partner agencies in addition to VCTC include the Valley Express Service, Moorpark City Transit, Simi Valley, Camarillo, Thousand Oaks, Ojai, and the Canaan Shuttle the county operates, and hopefully I didn't forget anybody. And so we've been working through those concepts. We'll talk about what that involves and how we've been trying to tailor each of our concepts to the unique needs in each of those communities, and then link that all together to improve service across the county. And as we go, we're vetting those concepts with staff to make sure that we're responsive to what they're hearing from the community and what they think are the priorities to address in the coming years. And we'll be going towards presentation of concepts to the public in early December of this year, and continuing that through into the post-holidays to present something that people can see, right? This is what we think is going to do better, and we want to make sure that we're aligning with people's needs and not potentially, altering something that's really important to somebody that we missed. So, looking forward to refining that and going into next summer with a clear plan that agencies can implement. I'll talk a little bit about how we're doing that in terms of what we call a travel market analysis. And if you've been with the commission, you've probably seen various versions of this, but what we try to do is use big data sources, origin destination data. There's a few products out there. We're actually using two on this study, Streetlight data and Replica data. They use a variety of sources from sampled from people's travel that they share through apps or other means to help us understand how people are moving around locally and across the county. And a couple of key findings that are informing what we need to do for the short-range transit plan. One thing that's really important that reinforces something we heard from the transit integration study that we completed the year prior. Local circulation is really a huge proportion of trips, right? More than half of trips from any individual community are going to somewhere else within that community, right? People need to get to something in town, and we want to make sure that transit is responsive to that because it's a big market. There is still a real need for regional connectivity through the day, and it varies by community, but it's still a large portion of travel that we want to make sure is served. What's really important, though, and I think this is a sea change after the pandemic about how we talk about travel, is really to reinforce that we often talk about transit in terms of serving commute trips, but commute trips are really only a small portion of the travel that anybody does in a given day. And we want to make sure that the transit network is able to respond to a wide variety of needs. It's not just jobs, right? 75% of people tend to work in a community other than the one that they live in, but that's not the majority of the travel out of all of the travel that we could be serving. And so we want to be really cognizant that the changes that we make help enhance a variety of, or an opportunity to take transit for a variety of trip purposes. And that's really been one of the keys to success for agencies recovering ridership post-pandemic, is making sure that there's regular service throughout the day and long enough into the day that they can make it there and back. And I think that's a really good segue into some of the detailed ways that we use the travel market data, right, is understanding travel patterns and times and comparing that to when and where transit service is available. So this is a very simple representation of how we answer this question, right? And we're looking right now, the map that we were showing previously was sort of travel within sort of the core developed areas of the county. And then what I did was pull out the times of day that trips begin. On the left, you have all trips. That includes anybody making a vehicle trip. It includes walking, which is a relatively small percentage. It includes the transit. And what I want to make the point here is the curve of these two graphs, the one on the right is showing just bus travel, and it's heavily skewed by Gold Coast service. So that's not a negative. Gold Coast runs a much more dense and longer service day because they serve a more dense and larger service area. So the curves look relatively similar, right? You have an early morning peak, steady growth through the afternoon, an afternoon peak, and then it falls off in the evening. But one thing that's really important here is on the left, travel on all modes, which is predominantly car, there's still about 10% of trips that begin after 6 until about 9 o'clock. And if you look countywide, excluding Gold Coast service, most transit services are beginning their last trips at 6 p.m. or even earlier in a couple of cases. And again, this is not a criticism, but this is something that we're seeing throughout my work, certainly across the Western U.S. with transit agencies, is that when budgets get tight, the first thing you do is start to cut the trips towards the end of the day that are not carrying a lot of passengers. The problem with that is it may seem fiscally responsible, but that means that that person can't get home. Or if they're working an overnight shift, they can't get to work. And they're not going to take half a trip. They're not going to use the transit system to get there if there isn't a means to get back. And we can talk about Lyft and Uber expanding opportunities to serve those kinds of trips, but for many people, that's simply not an option. And so we really need to make sure we're thinking carefully about how important it is to run some level of service to capture that, because it's not just the 10% of trips that we see after 6 p.m. It's the trip before that that they were making earlier in the day. And we want to align the transit service to the travel market in terms of where are people trying to go, right? A lot of people, the advantage of having a car and the benefit that we have if we're fortunate enough to have one is that we can make a quick trip to the grocery store, right? And in a car on the left, a 10-minute trip is not a big deal. So it's very easy to go out, run to the store. Oh, I forgot something, I've got to go, or I need to go to the library, whatever it is. On transit, it's much harder to serve that because if the bus doesn't come frequently enough, that's not a 5 to 10 minute trip. It might be, oh, I need to go, but the next bus is not for an hour, and then it's going to be, even if it's only 10 minutes on the bus, that's an hour and 10-minute trip, not a 10-minute trip. It is difficult to pair these things up. It's difficult to get us to a point where these curves on the left and the right match. But our objective is to try to balance them a little bit better between what's pointed out with the blue arrows, the 5 to 10-minute trips, serving a few more of those trips, and trying to take the longer trips that people often complain about. One of the issues with transit being it takes a long time to get places. We want to try to bring that trip time down a little bit, right? So try to balance between the blue and the orange arrows a little bit more. You can see on the right, the transit trip is a much higher percentage in the 40 to 80-minute range. So some of our early concept themes, as we're, again, doing all this data analysis, talking with staff, I want to enforce something really important. There's potential value and utility in having fixed route service in every community that we've looked at here in Ventura County, right? And many of them do operate some fixed route service now. And what we're trying to do first is look at where is that need and how do we balance it? How do we make it work better? And we'll talk about some of the ways that we do that in a moment. Another thing that's happened in the the transportation industry in I would say the past 10 years was the advent of microtransit. Microtransit is, if you're familiar with Dial-A-Ride, is basically Dial-A-Ride with an app, right? Dial-A-Ride is a program where you can call up and say, I need a ride from here to here tomorrow at 9 o'clock and then a return trip at 10 o'clock, and they will come to your door, pick you up, and bring you directly to your destination. It works really well in lower density communities or more suburban communities that maybe don't have sort of a grid development, like a pre-war grid development pattern. And so Dial-A-Ride has been around for a long time, basically since the 70s in the United States. Microtransit has afforded us the ability to modernize that type of service using apps and using technology to make that service faster response times, easier to reallocate. So it's a very exciting and really beneficial technology. The tricky thing is that because it's exciting and dynamic and modern sounding, it can be very attractive to put it out there and say, hey, this is a great success. We need to find a balance between the two because as you'll see in our presentation here, microtransit can actually draw people away from the fixed route service. And that's not necessarily what you want because microtransit has a ceiling at which it becomes less effective when it hits a certain point of demand. And we're finding this in some of our communities. The map here, just to illustrate, this is Moore Park's on-demand service, which is really successful. It's a great opportunity, right? But the blue dots are showing the way that they've created their microtransit service is not quite door-to-door. It asks you to walk to a virtual stop nearby, which is great. That's a good way to make it efficient. And their coverage is throughout the whole city, and that's very good. The challenge is that their fixed route service is also trying to do the same thing. And anybody who has the opportunity to take microtransit is not going to wait an hour for a fixed route bus if they can call a microtransit ride and get it in 15 minutes. And that's what we want to try to do with our SRTP. One of the big themes we're hearing is take the excitement about microtransit and make sure that we're being thoughtful about how we align and balance the two services so that the service areas are operated where and when. The fixed route service is going to be kind of less productive than about 4 or 5 people per hour because that's the limit at which microtransit works really well. And microtransit has a lot of trouble getting above that metric. And there's certainly more complication to that. But you know, one of the big examples that we'll talk about consistently here is high schools is a really good example of this, right? Microtransit works really well until about 3 o'clock. And then tech-savvy high school kids get out of school and they're like, oh, I can call a ride. And if you have 30 high school kids doing that who are all going slightly different places, the microtransit system falls apart and other people in the community have trouble getting rides at that time. So that's just one, but a really important example of how we want to make sure that we provide these services and balance them. Some general principles for the fixed route system, right? We want to balance the approach to think about in communities where walking works really well because it's an older built environment and it has a grid and you can walk from your house to a main street where a transit bus stop is. We want to make sure that transit buses in those contexts are trying to be more direct and straightforward and shorter than your walk time, right? One example that we have here is in Santa Paula. If the bus is trying to serve every front door of every possible destination, it will take longer to get across town than you could walk. And if it only comes once an hour, then it's going to be hard to convince somebody to use that. So in that context, we want to try to make transit service more direct. In other contexts, the communities that have developed more rapidly post-war, that are more, have sort of more insular neighborhoods and less opportunity for you to walk directly to a major road, we have to try to balance that need to have the service get a little bit closer to the front door in order to be attractive to people while still shortening travel times. I mentioned high schools, very important for a lot of communities in California to have service to high schools. It's important for equity because it helps families be able to manage all the different things that they need to do. And so we're trying to balance service to make sure that that is still front and center for a lot of communities. And in certain communities, hasn't traditionally been a travel market and may become one. We want to make more consistent frequency. A transit schedule should be easier to figure out than the Sunday crossword puzzle. You should be able to look at it and understand, oh, it comes at 5 past the hour every hour, right? To the extent that we can do that, that makes it much easier for people to see and rely on. They don't have to think about it as much. And then most importantly, serving the local travel needs that we've mentioned, getting people around town, but also using the network that we have between the local operators and the VCTC intercity service to help fill gaps in coverage between communities where it's difficult to do all of these things well. It's difficult to serve the high school, to avoid going to too many front doors, but get just enough front doors. And so one of the ways that we can do that is take this bigger picture look, which we're doing, at the network and help these operators see the opportunity to work together to fill in those gaps and create a more cohesive system. This is just a quick example of how we're trying to tailor that to the need, right? So I mentioned we have a number of partners. These are the partners for which we've advanced concepts at this point. Ojai and Thousand Oaks, we're not quite there yet. But this is just illustrating some of the different challenges that we have in different communities, right? From Camarillo all the way to VCTC Intercity on the right. There are some communities that need more help improving route coverage or streamlining their service, although that is a consistent theme is trying to streamline service. And other communities or services are really like, we know what the route is, we're set on this, there's not really a lot of other options and we're doing it pretty well. We just need help making sure that our service can continue for 10 years, that we have the funding and the partnerships and the marketing to attract people to the service and keep the support for it. I'm going to talk briefly about a couple of specific services, VCTC Intercity and Valley Express. So let's start with VCTC intercity services. So there are a lot, and the chart here is showing the ridership trends at the system level from pre-COVID to last year. And the colors illustrate the different route groups, right? There's service to Channel Islands, there's service up the coast to Santa Barbara, there's service to the Heritage Valley, Santa Paula Fillmore area, and there's service in the East County. And each of the services have had a different experience post-pandemic, right? The commute service for the Coastal Express up to Santa Barbara is not as large a proportion and has not recovered as much ridership as some of the other services, like the service on Highway 126, for example. And so some of the strategies that we're working with staff on are streamlining route variations so that the service is more consistent through the communities it starts in and the communities that it's connecting to throughout the day. Addressing on-time performance to make sure that the service is a little bit more reliable and that it's something people can count on and know that. and the revisiting customer focus is that what I mentioned about, right? If the Coastal Express has not been recovering as much because employment patterns has shifted and the need has shifted, is there an opportunity to rethink when, how, and where we're running that service? Not to completely restructure it, but to try to find opportunities to attract more riders who have different needs that are not commuting, right? And so some of those examples are considering where we can do some limited infill of local circulator, right? There may be an opportunity for VCTC to serve some more local stops, attract some more riders that maybe didn't want to have to drive to a central location to get the bus, or might want to just get to the next town over, even if that wasn't really the intent of the route when it was originally designed. And there are people who do that, right? There's lots of transit savvy people who figure out how you can use the system to meet your need, and we want to try to emphasize those travel opportunities more. And most importantly, I think here, right, there's a lot of intercity service that could help add more service between communities, much like the train does, right? So there's a whole component of this thinking about the Metrolink and the Pacific Surfliner service, and thinking about between those communities, can we add some additional connections and use that as a cross-promotional opportunity and a partnership. Valley Express is another example where we're taking a real hard look at what the history on the Valley Express was, what the community needs, and I think most importantly here, who we're not serving, right? This is a really critical one because the Valley Express service, I think, had a really strong start many years ago, but some decisions were made about underproductive service at the time that I think we want to revisit, and we want to think about how we can leverage technology and leverage the resources that we have to provide better service that's aligned with the core principles that we talked about before, right? So the ability for the bus to come frequently enough. Maybe you need to walk a little bit further to the bus than you did before, but if it comes more frequently and it's faster to your destination, that's usually a win. And that's pretty consistent with what we hear asking transit riders around the country what they want, right? It's not service necessarily directly to the front door. It's more frequent and faster. Thinking about the balance between the local travel among the cities, Santa Paula, Fillmore, and Piru, versus the regional connections that are provided there. There's also a lot that has changed, particularly in Santa Paula and Fillmore since 2015, and a lot of these plans were on the books at the time, but I want to make sure that we step back and think about the East Area 1 and East Area 2 developments in Santa Paula, a lot of new residents happening on the east side of both Santa Paula and Fillmore, and opportunities to help add transit service there. And then, much like I said a moment ago, the dial-a-ride approach is a good one. It's the right one, but if we're having trouble meeting peak demand and running it efficiently, then we need to be thinking about the balance between fixed route service and how we do that more direct demand response service. And we just want to make sure that the service is done in a financially sustainable way, right? Is the Valley Express operating a larger portion of the connectivity between those communities, and thinking about the balance of resources there with the VCTC service. So on the slide here, you see an example. This is just a very simple way to visualize the route coverage at various times. So all the colors represent is a different route, and the color block is just, that is the time that that route is operating. And so one of the key things that we saw when we first looked at this is, we've got to fix this because the service in Santa Paula is only running a few random hours a day, and there were reasons for that decision to be made, but we've got to go back and relook that. Nobody's going to use a bus that's only running a few times a day. And if you've got a dial-a-ride program on top of that, you're obviously going to use that. Our overall findings, pulling back out to sort of the county level, right? Improve local and regional mobility, set clear goals and objectives. We need to help our agencies be able to see what we set out to do at this point, right, in 2024 going to 2025. What were we trying to accomplish? Why? How do we measure whether or not we succeeded, or maybe that wasn't the best idea? And give staff a clear roadmap for how to evaluate that and adjust in the future, right? What we don't want is for 5 to 10 years from now, staff at the cities to have turned over, moved on, have different responsibilities, and nobody remembers, why did we do this, and is it clear whether or not it's working? So we want to make sure that the SRTP really helps people understand, why are we coming up with these recommendations to delineate service, to make these changes, to schedule it this way, to serve this destination? And there's a lot of opportunity for transit to grow beyond 2019 levels, right? We have not recovered back to where we were in almost any community, but I think a lot of the changes that we're talking about are well supported by changes that have been made in other parts of the country. So we're trying to bring that lens to our recommendations. And then just thinking back to the work that we had done for the commission previously on the transit integration and efficiency study, we want to really reinforce that the process through the SRTP has been very collaborative with staff. Everybody's been very positive and helpful in getting us information, but we still run into this challenge that staff have many responsibilities that are not just transit, particularly at the smaller cities. They have a lot of things attracting their attention, and it's hard to do all of this. And so one of the benefits of having a more integrated system where staff are dedicated to the transit program is their attention and expertise and resources are funneled into providing that service for the community and making it the best that it can be. So there's a lot of service that's out there right now that's very good that people don't know about, right? We need to make sure that the marketing materials are really good, that our online presence is really good, that the data management and reporting systems, staff have confidence in those systems, they understand how to use them, and it doesn't feel like taking the opportunity to coordinate where VCTC maybe helps get these systems online for the cities, but then they're like, well, I had a new person come in the middle of that transition and they don't know how to use the software, so we're just not using it, right? Those are the kinds of real issues that we hear about that we want to help solve through facilitating more collaboration and ultimately better integration in a way that doesn't necessarily have to affect the public. It just helps us make better use of staff resources and the funding that we have, right? So the best outcomes that we see are when transit staff are dedicated to the transit program. And I can't tell these communities, like, look, that person can't do this thing for public works, they have to do transit. I would love to say that because I want everybody to do lots of transit, but public works is a real important responsibility too. So to the extent that we can rethink how we allocate those resources and help each other, that's really important. And there will be a lot of those sort of technical elements in our recommendations for the SRTP. Just to wrap us up here, our next steps, as I mentioned, we're completing our draft service plan concepts, vetting them with the staff before they're ready for prime time to the public, going to the public with an open willingness to hear hard feedback and come back and refine them. So we're coordinating with our partners on that. We're talking about the integration elements, particularly with respect to the demand response and paratransit services countywide. We're going out to community engagement in December, and I'll say that again because we really need your help in getting your constituents to come provide feedback. We are going out to the community in early December for community engagement. We want to make sure that people come out and have something to say. They don't need to be current transit riders. We want them to be current transit riders or potential transit riders. We'll revise our service concepts in early 2025, going right into it in January and working through all the integration elements, all the implementation topics for staff to understand how to do the changes that we're recommending and why. And then we're expecting our final report to the commission and to all the stakeholders in the summer, and we'll be doing a roadshow at that time. So thanks for your attention. Happy to answer any questions.
I have go ahead. My first question is community engagement in December. Decembers are notoriously tricky to get people's attention.
Mm-hmm.
Have we thought about that? And okay?
Yes, we've talked with staff quite a bit about this. There's always a challenge. The windows, the best windows are, unfortunately kind of right now, and we weren't quite ready. We don't want to go out with concepts that we haven't gotten all of the way there on. And I mentioned we have a couple of communities that aren't quite there yet. We could delay, and that would be up to VCTC's direction. I think our preference is to make as hard a push as we can for that first week of December, and pound the pavement to get people out.
Supervisor Long?
Yes, thank you. I just want to make sure that in our outreach, we're looking also at the new Fillmore to Moore Park connection. I think that's really imperative. I know you've done studies before, but now that that's actually moving forward. And then also with the Heritage Valley, we did do some changes due to the schools and so forth. So I'll be interesting to hear what you have to say on that. I think that's really important that we're connecting all those communities, but then also if you can, with community engagement. It's also to the colleges, college districts. That's going to be really an important connection for us as well in the Santa Clara Valley. So just as a feedback. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Hey, I could just add quickly, thank you for the presentation, Jeremiah. And I was thinking in your comments about how the number of transit trips, most of them aren't work related necessarily, and I was thinking exactly of our new route, the Fillmore to Moore Park route, that the first person riding it from Moore Park to Fillmore was a woman going to visit her mother, her elderly mother, in Fillmore. So a classic example of a non-transit trip that she'd been hoping for this service for years. And since we adopted the TIES study, I just wanted to comment on it. We've made some good incremental progress, not just on adding a new route, which is frankly kind of remarkable right now in the post-pandemic transit environment under any circumstances, but the Access for All service that we're providing through the CPUC funding that we are doing. Gold Coast is also doing a novel microtransit project with that funding, and of course, the projects that are going on in Moore Park right now too. So I think there's been a lot. I just want to remind everyone, there's been a lot going on up to this point too, and we're certainly, depending on the feedback we get, we can certainly look at extending this also. I can talk with Claire about that. I think there's no issue there. Years ago, these used to be required documents. One of the first things I did was write a short-range transit plan. They had to be done every 5 years, or you wouldn't get funding. They're not. It's not the case anymore. We're doing this really just to make our system better, get feedback, kind of that whole.
I think we'll see pretty. I mean, if we're doing the outreach and we're not seeing the numbers which we anticipate, we can pivot.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think I mostly have comments, but we'll see if there ends up being a question in there. One is, I don't know if you have talked at all with, they have a microtransit that serves Hemet and the San Jacinto Valley. And so I don't know if you have talked at all with the executive director out there. We had a presentation at our SCAG meeting last month, and they've managed to put together a really amazing service. And so she talked about a lot of the lessons that they learned, and they had the benefit of having a fixed route that they dialed back. And so they kept the same bus stops where there used to be bus stops, but then, so there's a fixed route and then the virtual stops, and you're not allowed to book a trip that would compete with the fixed route. And so but it was really interesting how they were able to modify that. And in their case, they're actually saving $2 million a year by the way that they've set up their system. But she talked about how they had to be very hands-on in making sure that they were looking and adjusting and appropriately grouping trips and looking. So to your point of, you can't just sort of let it sit there. She made it very clear that they had to be hands-on in making sure that they were optimizing and grouping trips to the greatest extent possible. It wasn't like Lyft or Uber where you just have one person in there, but really trying to figure out the trends of, a bunch of kids go from here to here, 4 times a week after school. Let's make sure that those are all in the same vehicle. And so anyway, those were some of the things but her name is Kristen Warsinski, and she's with the Riverside Transit Agency, and she's the chief executive officer. So she had a lot of really good information in her presentation on things that have worked, things that they've learned. And then I know on the list for the Santa Clara Valley, the Heritage Valley Express, the school tripper was mentioned, and I've mentioned this several times, but making sure that as part of this process, we talk to the school district, because I occasionally hear from the school district, we need a bus. And I'm like, we have a bus. So anyway, just making sure that as part of this process, we do reach out to the school district and just see where their heads are at with that, because there's no point in us having competing systems. And then just in terms of getting from the Santa Clara Valley to other parts of the county, it's very challenging. I have a friend that is now transit dependent, not by choice, right? So has a car, can't drive it because of a catastrophic health incident. And it's been eye-opening how challenging it is. You know, you really can't get to Oxnard unless you want to spend 3.5 hours on multiple buses, right? And so for folks who, it's not just a matter of I can't afford a car, it's I can't drive a car, right? Like, how do you get from Santa Paula to an appointment in Oxnard? And sometimes those are at weird times of the day. And so she recently had to cancel an appointment because she couldn't find someone to take her because she couldn't get there on transit, right? And so just some of those challenges that folks have being in the Santa Clara Valley. Anyway, just some observations.
Thank you.
Today has definitely been a day of great presentations.
Thanks.
Awesome presentation. A lot of the comments that you made are comments that I've been kind of saying over the years about how transit needs to be working for the people rather than independent of itself. A couple of the comments that you made in regards to late night service after the last trip, starting around 6 o'clock, some even starting at 5 o'clock. I completely agree with that. It's been a big issue. One thing that I notice a difference between our county versus LA County or other counties is that they offer holiday service. They offer weekend service. So when I started working in LA and I'm thinking I'm gonna have Christmas Day off or Christmas Eve off, and they're telling me, oh no, you're working, but hey, you get double time and a half. I was like, but Ventura County's shut down. There's no bus service over there. People still have to get to work. So it's also another thing that we have to think about is that funding, yes, is an issue. We all are aware of that. But at the same time, we still have people that still need to get to work because grocery stores, department stores, all these other retail places are open. People working in hospitals still have to get to work, and that depends on transportation. But if there's no public transportation, how do they get there? Now they're looking at Ubers. Now they're walking. Now they're trying to ask family or friends on how to get to work. So we do a disservice to them. Prolonged headway times between bus trips, not really efficient or ideal. I know Gold Coast has done a great job of reducing their headway times. I think the shortest one is 15 minutes. Yes, 15 minutes, which is great because if you're trying to get to the grocery store, get to work, or jump to your friend's house real quick, the shorter headway times is a benefit. If I miss that bus, it's okay. The next bus is coming in about 10, 15 minutes. In regards to this, the microtransit, it's not a pick on Moore Park, but it's a good example. I agree that there shouldn't be competing things, and I agree with Commissioner Crosswright about having that ability to say, you can't book a trip if there's already a fixed route in that area. And what Gold Coast has done over the past couple of years, and I use Gold Coast because I used that service for years and I live in that service area, that when they removed a bus route from the Cal Gisler neighborhood, they backfilled it with the microtransit. So it gave people that opportunity to still be able to use public transit, but it didn't overbear on the fixed route services in the area. So it gave you that first last mile opportunity that I think needs to work together. That way you're not replacing the fixed routes. I think circular routes don't work. We need more north, south, east, west. It's a little bit harder in our East County communities because there's not really straight roads going north or south. They're kind of just windy and all over the place. But I agree with one comment that you made about if you're going to be focused on transit, that should be your focus. And splitting it amongst other things and then thinking that public transit is just can be cut at the wayside and it's not a big deal. It's a big deal for people that don't have cars. So for people to get a bad taste of public transit, chances are they don't return. And when they don't return, they're finding other means, that to the point where they're willing to put themselves in debt to get a car. So I appreciate the presentation. It was a great presentation, great information. Hopefully, we work with all of our communities and, you know, all of the commissioners here representing a city or an area that that they take that information back to their city staff and reevaluate, are we doing the best service to our community? Can we make adjustments based off of ridership and how we can still optimize it with the limited amount of funding that we have? I get it, funding is an issue. One of the things that I had suggested years ago for VCTC service was to kind of mimic what LA Metro has as far as their rapid or express service. It's one bus stop at major intersections and you have no other stops in between, because you had the local service in between them. So I wouldn't mind seeing a restructure of VCTC service, only because of the fact that West Ventura County is pretty much good and set as far as their system build out. VCTC's role, I think, is more of just that connector between the East and the West. And we just need to kind of build up the East County so that there is that connection amongst them also. So great presentation. Thank you for the information. And thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I wanted to say again what a great presentation this was. I wanted to bring up a couple issues. One of the things, you know, I get to do is on my role on City Council in Ventura is I'm a member of the School Liaison Committee, where we meet regularly with the school district and the colleges. And there are a couple trends that I think are important. One is that what we see among colleges, there is the community colleges, there is the declining enrollment. One of the pressures this is putting on colleges is trying to figure out how to be more efficient. And one of the way they're doing that is trying not to be duplicative. So in other words, they're expecting that there will be students in the district that take classes at Ventura College and Oxnard College and Moore Park College, because there are programs that are no longer offered at all three colleges. Similarly, when it comes to the school traffic, it very much has to be a concern about high schoolers wanting to use transit to get home. In California, most school districts are looking for a way to phase out buses. And that's simply a reality of school funding, and they are not transit agencies. And there is this tacit understanding that somebody else is going to pick up the slack. It could be parents in cars, it could be kids in cars. These are not ideal solutions. I really appreciated in the SRTS the point about the importance of having dedicated staff. That was not something I had considered before, and I think it makes a lot of sense. Having just spent 4 or 5 days in Anaheim with Mr. Erickson, who wears a whole bunch of different hats. I don't know what your hat size is, Mr. Erickson, but you must have a whole collection of hats. At APTA, certainly talking to people, most of them, that was their job, was just transit. And I do think that makes sense. I did want to put a plug in for Gold Coast because, Gold Coast, we're approaching record numbers of ridership. We've rebuilt it. So much of that is thanks to VCTC and the Youth Ride Free and College Ride Free programs. But I wanted to point out that, in Gold Coast, we have a sunrise service and a late night service, these safe ride services. The sunrise services starts at 4:30 in the morning, from 4:30 to 7 p.m., from 4:30 to 7 a.m., and then from 7 p.m. to midnight. In the Gold Coast area, it's $5 for a curb-to-curb ride. We use our paratransit vehicles to do this, and we do it mostly because we want to make sure that anybody who is working has a way to get home, because we are recapturing riders there. But it is also just a recognition that we are not in a position where we can add a bunch of more fixed route lines. And so there is a way to do it where you're filling in some places geographically, but in other places in terms of the timing so that you're not duplicating your efforts. And that's a wonderful solution. I want to point out, though, that, it meant that one of the things Gold Coast has needed to do was we've brought in our paratransit back in-house for cost savings. But those are paratransit vehicles that we're sending out to, and in some cases, it's, somebody goes downtown and they want to ride home, and they can do it with the late night safe rides for $5. It's a wonderful service, but it clearly cannot be the solution. But I encourage everybody else in the county to recognize how well off the residents of Ojai, Ventura, Oxnard, Port Hueneme, and the county areas have because of Gold Coast. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So if Daniel's gonna pick on Moore Park, I gotta defend myself on this one. So I'm only kidding. So this was kind of brought up too about the microtransit taking from the fixed route transit. And in Moore Park, it wasn't necessarily something we wanted to put together just to take away riders from the fixed route buses. It's because we have a 60-foot bus traveling around the neighborhood with 0 people on it. However, there is a need for transit. We all know that anyways. So adding the microtransit in town gave us the ability to bring people out that would need public transit, that wouldn't want to rely on the bus to actually use it. So it works out really well for us. And I think the issue is that not all cities are the same. I think Moore Park bus services is good to be able to get from Moore Park to Thousand Oaks or to Fillmore or so on. But once you get into Moore Park, the way our city is laid out, it might be a little different than Camarillo or Oxnard for that instance. But yeah, I think it's working out well for us here at least.
Oh, were you able to hear what I said? Okay. So I think we've covered, I think everything's been said. I've just brought to mind a quote from one of the many transportation books that I've read, and something like, the success of the city is not that everyone in the city can afford a car. It's a successful city if you can really get around without a car. And the more everyone's so concerned about global warming, and I think the more we connect these new modes of transportation with reducing pollution and global warming and the oil and all of that, I think there's a whole wonderful marketing opportunity aside from everything else that we're doing. Thank you so much for all the good work you're doing.
Thank you.
Great. It's just great.
Questions?
Okay, thank you very much, Jeremiah. I really appreciate it.
Thanks very much.
All right, Mr. Mattis is not there. Skip, why don't we can go back to that. Why don't we do agency reports? Do we have a SCAG update, Vice Chair Judge?
Thank you, Chair. Last SCAG start this month, but last week, I should say, Thursday, Friday, I was down in El Centro, and I got to go on a very educational tour of the geothermal and lithium extraction process down there, and it's very interesting. Maybe some people might not understand how it's going on, so I'll try to explain it really quickly. The geothermal plants down there outside of El Centro are situated over a large pool of naturally occurring hot water. It's about 5,000 feet down, and what the plants do is they draw the water out from the pool, run it through the turbines, create electricity, and then put it back into the ground. During that process, which has been going on since the mid-'80s, they discovered that the brine in the water contains a lot of lithium. So what they're doing is they're extracting the lithium from the brine. Now, just goes to show this was a great idea, it was a great find, it was something that they worked really hard to build. There's about 12 of these plants down there because they all create about 500 megawatts, which is the maximum you can create before you have to have state permitting. They're allowed to have county permitting at that level. So they're benefiting the county down there, Imperial County, greatly. As soon as the state found out that they were pulling lithium out of the water, for an example, the state was charging $60,000 a year to inspect the plants as soon as the state found out that they were pulling lithium out of the brine, the price went from $60,000 to $6 million a year, just for inspections. No changes, nothing else. Those are just inspections. So understand that that's the challenges, people trying to create this fabulous electricity stuff go through when they find something great like that. Otherwise, the plant itself was amazing to me, is the fact that it is self-regenerating energy. There's no oil, there's nothing else involved except just pulling hot water out of the ground, running it through turbines and putting it back. It comes back around, it's self-perpetuating. It's an amazing thing they're doing down there. So be aware of that. And so they're trying to find a way to get around to not get around, but they're trying to find a way to mitigate some of the state's fees to build bigger than 500-watt generators down there. So that's stuff they're doing down there. It was very interesting and very enlightening to me. And I suggest if you ever get a chance to go on a tour like that, do it, because SCAG offers those tours every so often. And like I said, it was very interesting. Other than that, I'll have a report for you next month on what SCAG's doing. We were dark this month because of the Jewish holiday, so that's the end of my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Tremblay, Metrolink.
Sure, very quickly. Mr. Kittle was here at the last meeting. We had a presentation on the new Metrolink reimagined service going into effect as of Monday, October 21. There'll be a 32%, looking at their press release, 32%, nearly 23% increase in service and adding 32 weekday trains. For the Ventura County line, that means adding 2 weekday trains, and the connection times will be much easier to utilize. So keep that in mind during your travels and communicating with your constituency. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner McDonald, Losan.
Thank you. We've had a couple discussions here about SB 1098 that was proposed by Senator Blakespear to oversee Losan. That was signed by the governor last Friday. So that means that CalSTA, or the State Transportation Agency, will now have to do an oversight report periodically. It's probably going to take a couple years to get it all sorted out and get it online, but so we're moving forward with that. Much like my partners at Metrolink, we're trying to get new train sets, which are probably going to be older train sets that we're going to have to refurbish to get into service because of the Olympics coming in 2028. And in 2026, FIFA is going to have 2 of the World Cup matches at SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles. And if you're a soccer fan and you want to go see an incredible soccer match, tickets are on sale now, and I would say buy them now because they'll probably go quick. And that concludes my report, and there is no Coastal Rail Coordinating Council report.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Johnson, CalCog.
Thank you, Chair. CalCog, I will say, you know, I will not be on CalCog much longer. I really hope somebody from VCTC is able to continue working with CalCog. There is a tension in CalCog over state transportation requirements, and I've spoken with Mr. Erickson about this. But when it comes to what CalCog will be lobbying for, there are some real discontinuities among the different agencies that are part of CalCog. You know, you've got Mayor John Bowders up from Emeryville on the one side to somebody who thinks that, you know, using VMT is a conspiracy. And CalCog is trying to find consensus. I will put in a plug for everybody. It's a fantastic group. Somebody, you know, if you take on CalCog, you will meet some great people and you will love it. But that's the update for CalCog.
Thank you. And I know Commissioner White is not here. Do you have any?
I do. I have a couple things for Cal Vans. Again, it's a wonderful opportunity. There are really 2 things. One is that Cal Vans has 6 battery-powered vans for the housing authority of the city of San Buenaventura, so that they can offer, you know, zero-emission van pools for residents at Westview Village. This is, of course, fantastic news. The second thing, though, and I will say this since Jim White is not here, I will say Cal Vans is in trouble. Cal Vans, we've got about 650 vans. 100 of them are van pools for traditional work. 550 of them are for agricultural use. Cal Vans is trying to figure out how to get to zero-emission agricultural vans. We're looking at, first off, conversion vans, which are unreliable, but then we are trying to find a vendor that can help us put in mobile charging stations, because the van fleet is mobile. There is no base. And they travel up and down throughout the state. In September, October, November, they're going to be heading down here. And then in January, February, they could be going all the way up, into Northern California. Having these agricultural vans that are out on dirt roads, that are out in fields, we're going to have to figure out a way to charge them on site. And so the problem for Cal Vans, the model is that the growers buy the vans and donate them to Cal Vans, and we operate them really on a shoestring budget. Well, who's going to pay for this charging infrastructure? And so Cal Vans right now is in the process of looking at a new JPA, changes to the JPA, in order to allow Cal Vans to figure out a path forward when it comes to buying equipment. And I have been watching this process go on for about 7 or 8 months, and there continue to be troubles getting an agreement with the JPA on ways to allow Cal Vans to borrow money. So this is going to be an issue for Cal Vans as a whole. I know it's going to be an issue for the city of San Buenaventura, and our county economy relies so heavily on agricultural work. If Cal Vans has a problem and is not able to meet the CARB requirements and is not able to charge these vans, we will go back to the days where the fields are full of 15-year-old minivans that people are driving to get to the fields. So since Jim is not here, I figured I'd take the opportunity just to lay out my concern. It's not all hunky-dory. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you so much, Chair.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Johnson. Mr. Mattis, did we have a general counsel report?
There was nothing to report today. Thank you.
And Chair Levere, if I could just say one last comment. I first just want to wish everyone a happy Halloween and look forward to seeing you all November 1st. And then finally, in your executive director's report, there was a link to a survey that we're doing for the Rails to Trails bikeway project in the city of Ventura along our branch line. But Amanda also has some hard copy surveys if anybody would like to have one of those before they leave, or you can do it also online with the link. But thank you.
And if anyone's bored on Halloween night and you want to come out and give candy out at our house, we expect about 1,000 kids to come by, so we can use the help.
Okay. I think that concludes then. We will adjourn. I'll see everybody on Friday, November 1st. Thank you, everyone.
Where do you live that you get 1,000 kids? Where?